recently divorced billionaire, took me, his housekeeper, to an important meeting. However, what I said there astonished every attendee. I stood before the grand entrance of the Johnson estate, the morning sun catching in my blonde hair. With a deep breath, I finally rang the bell, signaling the start of a new chapter in my life. Next to me was a slightly worn suitcase, packed with not just clothes, but also with my dreams and hopes. When the door opened, Keith Johnson stood there, his imposing stature and sharp gaze enough to intimidate even the bravest soul. But I stood tall and met his eyes with unwavering determination. I was ready to face whatever came my way. Without averting my gaze, I spoke, trying to keep my trembling hand steady as I offered him my resume and letters of recommendation. Good morning. I'm Haley Miller. I'm here to apply for the housekeeper position. Here are my resume and references, I said, my voice filled with a nervous yet clear confidence. Keith took the documents without a smile and scanned each line quickly, as if searching for something that would justify my presence there. Time seemed to stretch as he read through the papers. Finally, Keith spoke in a deep, contemplative tone. Haley Miller, he said. This house is more than just a home to me. It's a symbol of my success and a part of my business. I demand perfection in every aspect of my life, especially in how this estate is managed. No failures, delays, or excuses are tolerated. If I hire you, you must guarantee adherence to these principles. Are you prepared for that? His words weighed heavily on me, making me acutely aware of the responsibility I was about to undertake. At the start of our conversation, I had felt a flicker of anxiety. But my desire to change my circumstances gave me strength. I responded with a seriousness and professionalism that I hoped matched his expectations. Mr. Johnson, I fully understand the significance of this role and what it means to you. I take pride in my ability to dedicate myself to work ethics and responsibilities. If given the chance, I promise not only to meet your expectations, but to exceed them. I am here not just to work, but to contribute and ensure that every aspect of this home reflects the excellence you seek. As silence fell, Keith evaluated the sincerity and resolve in my words. Finally, he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was his way of accepting me into this new world. Well then, start tomorrow. Let's see if you truly have the ability to keep your promises. The sunrise at the Johnson estate marked a refreshing new beginning for me. I woke early, filled with eagerness and determination for my first day. Light filtered through the curtains of my modest room, promising a day full of possibilities. I reflected on how each action would show my gratitude for this opportunity. I understood the high expectations and knew that meeting them would secure my place in this home. The first step in the grand estate of the prestigious Johnson family had begun. On my way to the kitchen, I encountered Melissa, the lady of the Johnson household. Good morning, Haley. Did you sleep well? The first day can be a bit nerve-wracking, but I'll be here to support you. Let's have breakfast together and chat a bit, then I'll help you get settled in. I felt a surge of gratitude for Melissa's kindness. Her warm smile was a comforting balm. That sounds wonderful. Thank you so much for your kindness. I am a bit nervous, but I'm determined to do my best. During breakfast, Melissa shared valuable advice about the house, Keith's preferences, and little tips to keep everything running smoothly. Keith has some unique quirks, Haley. For instance, he prefers the library to be cleaned early in the morning, so it's undisturbed later. And he likes the garden to be perfectly maintained at all times. These may seem like small things, but they make a big difference. Thank you for these invaluable tips. I will do my utmost to meet his expectations and keep the house in the best condition. Your advice is incredibly valuable to me. I felt a boost of confidence from Melissa's words as I faced the challenges ahead. Throughout the day, I followed Melissa's instructions, meticulously cleaning the spaces and preparing lunch with careful attention to detail. Melissa occasionally appeared, offering words of encouragement and appreciation for my efforts. When Keith came home at the end of the day, Melissa reported to him about my work. Keith, Haley worked exceptionally hard today. She followed our advice, and I believe you'll notice the difference." Melissa spoke with a pride that words alone couldn't capture, as she praised me. Keith observed the environment, noticed the details of my work, and turned to me with an approving expression. "It seems Melissa has guided you well, Haley. I'm satisfied. If you keep up this pace, you'll blend seamlessly into this home." I felt relieved and encouraged by Keith's words, and responded gratefully. "Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I appreciate her guidance and trust. I am honored to contribute to the comfort of this home and promise to do my best every day." Weeks passed since I first arrived at the Johnson residence. The daily routine was becoming more familiar, and I grew increasingly confident in my responsibilities. Much of this was thanks to the friendship that blossomed between Melissa and me. On a sunny afternoon, after finishing my morning tasks, I found Melissa tending to her favorite roses in the garden. With a warm smile, she called me over. "Haley, come here. I've noticed you have a special talent with plants. Would you help me with this rose? I always think the garden reflects the soul of the home. I'd be delighted to share that with you." Touched by her thoughtfulness, I accepted the invitation. As we worked side by side, Melissa began to share more about herself. "Haley, to many, this house may seem like just an expensive collection of walls and furniture, but to me, it's so much more. It's a place filled with memories, joy, and yes, a bit of sorrow. Keith and I dreamed of creating a place that was not only beautiful but genuinely welcoming and loving. Seeing how you care for this house, I feel you share that dream with us." Feeling like a part of this world, I responded sincerely. "Mrs. Johnson, from the day I arrived, I've received unexpected kindness. The house and all it represents have started to mean a lot to me as well. I can feel the love and care embedded in every detail. It's an honor to be a part of this, and I promise to cherish and respect it with the same affection and care." Melissa was deeply touched by my words. "Haley, you're already part of this family. Your dedication and warmth are truly appreciated." Keith and Melissa both expressed their gratitude for having me with them and hoped I would stay with them for a long time. As the evening approached, Melissa and I continued to tend to the roses quietly, each lost in our own thoughts. For me, that moment felt like the beginning of a new chapter in my life, a time for growth and learning. For Melissa, it was confirmation that her home was now in the hands of someone who shared her values and dreams. Daily life at the Johnson residence continued, and as time went on, I began to notice the subtle nuances of the family's routines. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, I stumbled upon a scene that unsettled me deeply. I caught a glimpse of a side of Keith I had never seen before. Keith and Melissa were in the living room, speaking in hushed tones, but the tension in their voices was palpable even from afar. I tried to concentrate on my task, but Keith's voice grew louder, making it impossible to ignore. "I've told you many times, Melissa, this approach won't work. You always cling to your methods without considering the results. This cannot continue." Melissa responded with a calm voice, though her sadness was evident. "Keith, I was only trying to help. I thought working together would find a better solution for everyone. Why do you always see it as a competition?" My heart ached hearing Melissa's words. Her voice, usually filled with kindness and understanding, now sounded like that of a mediator, and I couldn't ignore it. Keith, realizing his voice had risen more than intended, fell silent and looked at Melissa. "Melissa, you know everything I do is for this family and this house. But sometimes, you need to trust my judgment. We can't afford to be lenient." Melissa sighed. It felt like a recurring argument. "Keith, I trust you. I always have. But you need to trust me too, and my love for this family. I'm not competing with you. I'm right here beside you." Once I finished setting the table, I quietly stepped away, leaving them alone. The brief conversation revealed the complexity of the Johnson family's dynamics, something I was just beginning to understand. The tension between Keith and Melissa was a reflection of their underlying conflicts, a new experience for me. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on the evening's events. Sure, money might mask appearances, but in the end, we're all the same. I'm struggling with a modest income, and they are wealthy but seem to be in an unhappy relationship. At least, that's how it seems to me. Melissa is a kind person who doesn't deserve to be spoken to that way. The next morning, just as the sun was beginning to rise, I started my usual routine at the Johnson residence. The house was still shrouded in quiet, with the first light softly illuminating the hallway through the wide windows. I moved efficiently around the kitchen, preparing breakfast as usual. At that moment, Keith suddenly walked in. His face bore the persistent storm of his worries. "Haley, is breakfast ready yet? I'm starving and have an important appointment soon. I can't be late for it, no matter what." Keith's voice cut through the air, sharper and colder than usual. It was as if each of his words carried the weight of countless responsibilities. I was taken aback by his early morning attitude and his harsh words, but I managed to stay calm and respond. "It's almost ready, sir. Just a few more moments, and everything will be on the table." Keith crossed his arms and glanced around the kitchen with a dissatisfied look. "What are you dragging your feet for? You had plenty of time, so you must have done everything according to my instructions. I don't want to repeat the same issues we had with the previous housekeeper." His words felt unjust to me. The day before had been particularly challenging, with a few minor mishaps that I couldn't fully avoid, despite my best efforts. "Sir, I followed all the instructions to the letter. Every day, I strive to meet expectations, and I will continue to make improvements." Keith sighed and ran his hand through his hair. This was a rare show of patience from him. "Haley, I'm not doubting your efforts. However, this house has certain standards, and I expect those to be maintained. It's not just about preparing breakfast, it's about upholding the order and efficiency of this household and representing the Johnson family correctly. How can I trust an employee who can't deliver meals on time?" For a moment, I glimpsed the burden Keith carried behind his imposing facade. "Sir, I understand my role here and what it means for your family. I will do my utmost to avoid repeating any mistakes. Please, trust in my commitment." Keith studied me for a while, as if weighing my words. When I finished the preparations, he hurriedly grabbed breakfast. He barely touched most of the dishes on the table, revealing that his dissatisfaction was more than just hunger. He quickly left the house to attend an important meeting that afternoon. That evening, when Keith returned from a major meeting with his company, the tension in the Johnson household reached its peak. As I tidied the living room, I began to hear the intense argument between Keith and Melissa echoing through the hallway. Though the words were muffled, the emotional intensity was clear. I didn't want to overhear, but when I heard my name mentioned, I felt compelled to check in. From a bit away in the hallway, I saw Melissa speaking with a strength I hadn't heard before, asserting that my capabilities and the way interactions were handled in this house required humanity. "Keith, we can't keep treating people like tools to bend to our will. Haley has been working harder than expected, and that effort deserves recognition, not reprimand. We must remember to treat everyone in this house with respect and dignity, regardless of their role." Keith was visibly irritated and, though surprised by Melissa's strong stance, replied sharply. "Melissa, it's my responsibility to maintain the standards of this house and our lives. Do you think it's easy? Do you understand the tough decisions involved? I'm doing what's necessary. If that means being strict with employees, then so be it. You don't carry the weight of this family or manage one of the largest companies in the country. I do. That gives me the right to decide how people are treated." Melissa took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure, but her voice betrayed her emotions. "I understand the pressure you're under. But Keith, we can't lose our humanity in the process. If even in our home, compassion is sacrificed in the name of standards, what are we truly valuing? We might end up with a perfect household, but at what cost? The issue isn't with Haley, it's with how we're living our lives." The argument reached a decisive turning point, and Keith spoke with a finality that suggested a deep, resolute decision. "If you can't support the decisions I make for this family, then you need to reconsider your place in this household and in the life we're trying to build. I cannot tolerate your sentimentality putting our future at risk." When I overheard those words, it felt as if the very air in the room had been sucked out in an instant. The silence that followed was deafening, almost like a heavy curtain had dropped, obscuring everything. Melissa, trying desperately to hide her tears while maintaining her dignity, responded, "If this is truly your intention and if this is the future you desire, then I cannot be part of it." The sound of Melissa's footsteps as she walked away resonated in the corridor, each step echoing like a widening chasm in the fabric of our household. Keith remained silent, and I stood there, my breath held, grappling with a mix of respect and sorrow for Melissa. Melissa chose to uphold her beliefs and her humanity, even at the cost of her place here. After the emotional storm had subsided, I found Melissa in the garden. Her eyes reflected the pain of having made a difficult but necessary decision. The cold afternoon air did little to ease the heavy atmosphere between us. Moved by empathy and understanding, I approached Melissa with hesitant yet sincere words of comfort. "Melissa, I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I heard what happened. I'm truly sorry for what has transpired. I know it's not my place to interfere, but please accept my gratitude and respect. You've defended not only my dignity but the dignity of everyone who works here." I spoke, nearly overwhelmed by my own emotions. Melissa looked at me with a sad smile. "Haley, in these past days, you've shown me more humanity and understanding than many people I've known for years. There's no need for you to apologize. In fact, I should be the one thanking you. You've made me realize that even if it means painful change, one should never compromise their values. Now, I'm thinking of going to stay with my sister in the countryside. Hopefully, in that quiet place, I can decide my next step." Touched by Melissa's honesty and vulnerability, I responded, "I can't find the right words, but Melissa, wherever you go, I hope you find all the happiness and peace you deserve. Your courage to stand by what's right is precious. If there's anything I can do, even from afar, please let me help." Melissa took my hand in hers, a gesture of gratitude and connection. "Thank you, Haley. Let's stay in touch, I promise. And perhaps, this is not goodbye, but a farewell until we meet again. Life has a way of surprising us, after all." The two of us shared a final embrace, filled with emotion and a quiet hope for the future. As I watched Melissa leave, I felt a mix of respect and sorrow. I sensed a dramatic shift in Melissa's world, yet I deeply admired her strength. At that moment, though I wasn't sure of everything, I was certain that something had changed within me. If necessary, I'm ready to confront Keith. Like Melissa, I need to defend my own dignity. But with how crucial this job is, how can I make that happen? In the quiet of the morning, I had finished preparing breakfast in the kitchen. Then, Keith came downstairs. His footsteps on the stairs carried an air of authority, and he entered the kitchen. His expression spoke volumes about the worries awaiting him that day. "Good morning, Haley. I expect the house to be in perfect order today. I have an important meeting at the company, so I hope there will be no issues when I return." Keith's voice was firm, though he tried to sound fair. I turned to face him, still holding the tray in my hands, and answered in a calm voice that surprised even me. "Good morning, Mr. Johnson. Rest assured, everything will be arranged just as you expect. After the meeting, the house will be in perfect condition to welcome you." Mr. Johnson paused for a moment, as if evaluating my confident demeanor. "I hope that's the case, Haley. We're going through a tough time, and I want to avoid any more problems. The company is in a delicate phase, and I need the house to be a place of peace. I can't handle any additional stress." I placed the tray on the table, choosing my words carefully as I took a brief pause. "Understood, Mr. Johnson. I'll ensure that the house remains a necessary refuge for you. Mrs. Johnson always said that this place should be a home for everyone. Even now, without her, I'll honor that vision and do my best." Mr. Johnson sighed, a rare gesture that revealed the weight he was carrying. Melissa always had a generous heart. Sometimes a bit too generous, but you're right, Haley. This house must be a place of tranquility. I appreciate your dedication and hope you'll continue as you are. He nodded and made his way to the door, but stopped briefly, as if something was left unsaid. Haley, your dedication hasn't gone unnoticed. After the meeting, we should discuss the future. I believe there's a way to reward your efforts more fittingly. I was taken aback by this unexpected turn of events, unable to do more than nod in response. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Please let me know if there's anything else you need. As I watched Mr. Johnson leave through the front door, I was filled with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. The conversation had hinted at not only Mr. Johnson's vulnerability but also the possibility of new opportunities opening up. I reminded myself, this might be the door to a new phase in this household. But whether this news is good or bad, I still don't know. As evening began to fall, Mr. Johnson returned from the meeting, his expression a blend of tension and relief. Having been busy preparing the house, I immediately noticed the change in him as he walked in. Mr. Johnson found me in the living room, where I had just finished the final touches, and went straight to the point. His voice carried a sense of urgency. Haley, today presented more challenges and opportunities than expected. Tonight, there's a business dinner, and I accidentally mentioned that I'm married. I need you to accompany me and pretend to be my wife. I was stunned by the outlandish request and hesitated for a moment, but Mr. Johnson's serious gaze left no room for doubt about the gravity of his words. Mr. Johnson, this is unexpected, but I understand the situation. What specifically should I do? I'm not your wife, and I don't know much about you. I'm not prepared for something like this. Mr. Johnson approached me, softening his expression. I don't think it will be too difficult for you. Mostly, you just need to stay quiet and answer questions about us only when necessary. In other words, you won't have to say much. Just being by my side will convey the stability we need to show. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. I understand this is important for you and the company, Mr. Johnson. I'll do my best to meet your expectations. Mr. Johnson nodded, and for a moment, I saw a flash of relief in his eyes. Thank you, Haley. Your help is invaluable. Let's get through this together. I'll provide whatever you need, dresses, accessories, anything to ensure you're comfortable and confident. The decision had been made, and I could feel the weight of the responsibility settle on my shoulders. I was excited, though I didn't entirely understand why. This was my chance to see Keith's world from a perspective I had never imagined before. All right, I'll get ready. Let's make tonight a success. While Keith climbed the stairs to prepare, I stood in the living room, lost in thought. That night, it was more than just a business dinner, it was a moment where doors to challenges and opportunities I had never considered before opened up for me. With determination, I climbed the stairs, preparing myself to face what lay ahead. From that moment, I knew everything was going to be different from before. The atmosphere at the upscale restaurant was filled with anticipation. I was dressed elegantly, but inside, I felt out of place. Keith and I made our way to the reserved table for dinner with the investors. Among them was David, the owner of the company where Keith worked. Keith stood out with his confident demeanor. After the initial greetings, as everyone settled into their seats, David's gaze turned to me with curiosity, observing me closely. Noticing his interest, Keith made the formal introduction. David, let me introduce you to my wife, Haley. Haley, this is one of our most important investors, David. It's a pleasure to meet you. David extended his hand as he spoke. Though nervous, I responded with a modest smile, feeling my cheeks flush. The pleasure is mine, David. As dinner progressed, David showed particular interest in our partnership and occasionally threw questions at both Keith and me. At one point, he turned directly to me and asked a question that seemed to test my acumen. Haley, I greatly admire how Keith runs his business. In your opinion, what's the key to maintaining success while keeping harmony at home? I was taken aback by the sudden focus, feeling a swirl of emotions inside me. I glanced at Keith for support and answered. Well, David, I believe the key, both in business and personal life, is communication and mutual understanding. Keith always strives for transparency in his intentions and actions. I think that's essential for building a strong company and a harmonious home. David nodded, clearly impressed. That's a fascinating perspective. Indeed, transparency is a crucial pillar in all relationships, whether at home, at work, or in society. Keith looked at me with a smile, his eyes reflecting pride and gratitude. Keith once told David, "Haley sees the world through her own unique lens. She helps me stay grounded and remember what truly matters. That's why we love each other so deeply and why we'll spend many more years together." David smiled more relaxedly and toasted to my answer. Haley's words have brought a breath of fresh air to this conversation. They remind us of how vital simple yet profound principles are in both our business and personal lives. As the dinner continued, I started to feel more at ease, realizing that my presence was more than just Keith's plus one. I was making a valuable contribution. The initial tension slowly gave way to satisfaction at having expressed my thoughts with conviction. At the end of the evening, David praised me once again as we were about to part ways. "Keith, you're fortunate to have someone with such sharp insight by your side. Haley, it was an honor to meet you. I look forward to seeing you again." On the drive home, I reflected on the night. My conversation with David had been a challenge, but also an opportunity to show my strength and intellect. Quietly, I resolved, next time, I won't doubt my abilities. Tonight was truly remarkable. If Melissa had seen how I handled that important man today, she would surely be thrilled. But as we returned from the business dinner, the atmosphere at the Johnson estate was tense. Keith started voicing his displeasure as soon as the door closed. In the quiet of the night, Keith said coldly, "Haley, do you realize what you've done? By engaging with David like that, you've opened a Pandora's box." He continued with frustration in his voice. "He's a shark in the business world, always looking for an edge. Now, he'll relentlessly question us and probe into our affairs. This should never have happened." I was taken aback by Keith's intensity. I had only tried to help, never expecting my actions would be condemned. I stammered, trying to explain, "I just thought." "Just thought?" "Haley, you're not here to think. You're an aide, not an executive. Your help might have put us in a difficult spot. He's now taking a special interest in us. This is going to be a hassle." Keith cut me off, showing clear irritation. Hurt by his harshness, I tried to keep my composure and replied, "Then I suppose we'll have to continue this charade with your colleagues?" My question came out weaker than intended, only exposing my unease. "Of course, Haley. Because of your little performance, we'll have to do it more than ever. But understand this isn't an invitation for you to get more involved. Do as you're told. No more improvisation. This is serious. There's too much at stake." Keith's stern expression left no room for negotiation. The silence that followed was heavy, and I struggled to maintain my calm. "I only wanted to help and didn't mean to cause you any trouble. But I see I was wrong. I won't make the same mistake again." I responded with a steady voice, hiding the turmoil within. "Do as you're told, Haley. No more surprises. You have a specific role, and that's all that's expected of you. No more deviations will be tolerated." Keith's voice was firm and emphasized each word as if reminding me of my place. I accepted the reprimand and simply nodded. After Keith left, I was left alone in the dimly lit living room, facing the harsh reality of my situation. Tonight's events felt like an unexpected dive into a world I barely understood, and Keith's reaction was a cold reminder of my true place. I whispered to myself, trying to make sense of it all. I don't know what I was thinking. I'm just a cleaner, a servant. And maybe that's all I'll ever be. I'm not Mrs. Johnson. I'm not brave or wise like Melissa. She'd probably be ashamed of me. The quiet morning began, and in the expansive Johnson estate, Keith was in his office. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, casting shadows on the dark wooden furniture. He was on the phone, his voice low and authoritative, the kind used to being obeyed without question. "Yes, David. Having dinner at my place will be the best way to clear up any misunderstandings. Keith jotted something in a leather-bound notebook as he spoke. Of course, it will also be a great opportunity to discuss future business. We look forward to seeing you and the others at 8 p.m. tomorrow. As soon as he hung up, he called for me. I entered, my hair in a simple bun, my hands clasped in front of me, my expression neutral. Keith wasted no time and got straight to the point. Haley, tomorrow we have a very important dinner with guests. Everything must be perfect, including you. However, you should be as invisible as possible. Provide the food, keep everything clean, but under no circumstances should you interact with the guests, especially David. After the incident at the business dinner, we can't afford any mistakes. Do you understand? His voice was sharp, each word dripping with authority. I felt a sting of humiliation but respected the rules, responding quietly but firmly. Yes, Mr. Johnson. I understand perfectly. I'll follow your instructions and ensure the evening goes smoothly without any problems. Rest assured. Keith looked at me briefly, checking for any signs of dissent, but my demeanor was one of obedience. Perfect. And one more thing. He continued, his expression softening. Until the guests leave, if there's anything you need, just let me know. Don't worry about anything else. I want to avoid any misunderstandings. Understood, Mr. Johnson. I'll follow your instructions. I replied, trying to maintain my composure, but it was clear that his instructions were meant to isolate me and make me an invisible presence. Keith seemed satisfied and returned his attention to the paperwork in front of him. I left the office and quietly closed the door behind me. As I made my way back to the kitchen, I couldn't shake the feeling that Keith's orders had diminished me. In the end, everything goes back to the way it was. I must act like furniture, completely unseen. I murmured softly to myself. I promised that everything would go smoothly, but if it didn't, I might lose my job. The next day, Mr. David finally arrived, accompanied by 2 important business associates of Mr. Johnson. Keith welcomed them warmly. Please, dinner is already prepared, so help yourselves before it gets cold. Let's discuss everything over this fine meal. He guided the guests to the dining room, and everyone took their seats. I came out from the kitchen to greet David and the 2 other men, trying to keep my greetings brief and neutral. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our home. Please, make yourselves comfortable. If you need anything, just call for me. Mrs. Johnson, please have a seat. Your presence is important to us, and you might be interested in what we have to say about your husband. Please, take a seat. I felt uneasy about going against Keith's direct instructions, but had no other choice but to accept the invitation. Throughout dinner, David was the center of attention, discussing business and future plans. Keith was actively participating in the conversation, but I could feel him occasionally glancing my way, as if checking if I was staying out of the spotlight. It was as if I wasn't even there. While I was pouring wine, David suddenly addressed me. It's quite quiet tonight, Mrs. Johnson. As your husband's wife, I think you should participate more in the conversation. Please, share more with us. We're interested in hearing people's voices and opinions. Embarrassed and nervous, I took David's invitation as an opportunity and replied. Of course, David. I'm happy to engage in the company discussions, though I'm not very knowledgeable about these matters. That's more my husband's expertise. I smiled modestly as I spoke. Keith quickly interrupted, trying to steer the conversation away. Haley is a wonderful wife who helps us stay focused on what's important, ensuring everything runs smoothly. David, I believe we discussed the expansion into South America, and I'd like to hear more about that. The conversation shifted back to business, but that brief moment slightly altered the evening's atmosphere. I noticed that Keith seemed dissatisfied with that exchange and tried even harder to remain inconspicuous. Dinner continued with a subtle tension, and the discomfort grew when David recognized my intelligence and asked me about the company's future. Not missing the chance, I shared my opinion. From what I've heard, while my husband has discussed the company, he seems less interested in American expansion right now. My mother lives in Canada, and she says Toronto is one of the best cities for expanding business and reducing taxes. It's a thriving city for those looking to grow their enterprises. I spoke with confidence and conviction. Toronto, of course. How did I not think of that? Keith, perhaps you should have shared this woman's wisdom with me sooner? It might have saved us from the crisis after last year's disastrous product launch. That was your idea, wasn't it? David looked at Keith with questioning eyes. Before he could finish processing the idea, Keith suddenly broke the silence at the table. He stood up and pointed at me. Haley is our servant, David. She has no involvement in the company's business and knows nothing about entrepreneurship. As for the talk about Toronto, I don't know where it came from, but I wouldn't trust the idea of a mere servant. If there has been any misunderstanding, I apologize. Keith's words thundered across the table, leaving behind a sense of shock and discomfort. I felt a surge of both surprise and humiliation, but I tried to maintain my composure. I'm so sorry. I only wanted to contribute to the conversation. I apologize for overstepping my bounds. I never meant to ruin the evening. I'm truly sorry. I said this while trying to hide my shame. David reacted swiftly and harshly. This is unbelievable, Keith. You had this woman pretend to be your wife at a business dinner? Do you understand how this reflects on us? How can we trust a leader who makes such reckless decisions? Keith, taken aback by David's anger, desperately tried to explain. David, it was a decision made in a moment of desperation. I assure you this does not reflect my leadership abilities. I'll fire this servant immediately and find a way to make things right. Even so, deception can't be justified, Keith. And, Haley, you shouldn't have been put in such a position. No one should have to endure that, and it's disgraceful that Keith's lack of courtesy led to this. David acknowledged the pressure I had faced and reprimanded me. I nodded, feeling a mix of complex emotions. I'm sorry for letting you down, David. I deeply regret my role in this matter. David sighed, his expression softening a bit. Your intelligence and knowledge are impressive, Haley. Please give me your phone number. It's a good idea to keep someone like you close, and I feel I may need to contact you again in the future. He then turned to Keith and delivered a stern decision. Keith, I hope you seriously consider the impact of your actions and how they've affected our trust. I'm going to have to let you go. The dinner ended in a somber atmosphere, and David departed, clearly dissatisfied. Keith and I were left in heavy silence, each of us lost in our thoughts about the evening's outcome. As I was clearing the dishes, Keith approached with a look of regret and confusion. Haley, I'm sorry for putting you in this situation. Though it pains me to say this, given tonight's events, your position in this house is no longer necessary. I needed the job, but I didn't beg or plead. My response was resolute. Tonight's events have opened my eyes. David saw something I hadn't realized about myself. I want to grow and achieve great things. I believe I can reach where I want to be without pretending to be someone's wife. Keith stared at me in shock, and then his darkest side emerged. His voice was tinged with anger. Then get out of this house. Find somewhere else to live, if you can. It'll be clear soon enough that you're nothing more than a cheap maid. I can't believe I allowed you to pretend to be my wife. The next day, unemployed once again, I sought refuge in the modest home where Melissa lived with her sister. When Melissa opened the door, her worried expression turned to sympathy upon seeing me. Seeing my disheartened face, Melissa asked, Haley, what happened? Are you okay? As she guided me inside. Exhausted both mentally and physically, I confided in Melissa about the events of the previous night, the tension with Keith, and ultimately, my dismissal. I poured out my anxieties and the tangled emotions I was feeling. I don't know what to do now, Melissa. Everything happened so suddenly, and I'm completely at a loss. I confessed this while wringing my hands, trying to keep my composure. Melissa listened attentively, her face reflecting sympathy for me. After a moment of contemplation, Melissa spoke with determination. Haley, you're not alone. It might seem dark now, but you're a strong person, and I'm here to help you. She paused, choosing her words carefully before continuing. Why don't you stay here for a while? My sister won't mind, and you can make this place your home while you think about your next steps. Her offer felt like a beacon of hope amid the storm. I looked up at Melissa, meeting her gaze, not just seeing a place to stay, but the promise of friendship and support. I don't know how to thank you, Melissa. I truly appreciate it. I responded with heartfelt gratitude. I'll find a way to repay you for what you've done. I'm grateful for your acceptance from the very beginning. During a quiet breakfast, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. When I answered, it was someone I hadn't expected. Is this Haley? This is David. I need to discuss something very important with you. Can you come to the office right away? Curiosity and tension mingled in my voice as I accepted the invitation. Melissa sensed my anxiety and offered to drive me, providing the emotional support I needed to face this crucial moment in my life. On the way to the office, my mind raced with thoughts about why I had been summoned. Is he going to reprimand me for something Keith and I did? Or will he praise me for something I said in the meeting? Or is he going to complain about something? I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease, no matter how much I tried to prepare myself mentally. I entered the building alone and took a seat in David's imposing office, listening intently as he began to explain the purpose of my visit. Haley, your ability to handle a complex situation under pressure was impressive. Therefore, I'd like to offer you a leadership position within the company. I believe your unique skills and fresh perspective will bring a new vision to our team. I want you to start in the position that Keith held. I could hardly believe my ears. The leap from being a servant to a leadership position in a major corporation seemed unreal. But David's confidence in my potential was clear and inspiring. Our conversation marked a significant turning point in my life. As I left the office, overwhelmed with mixed emotions, I felt that accepting the offer could forever change my future. Outside, waiting for news, Melissa was overcome with emotion when she heard about the offer. Melissa, I've been offered a job. It's unbelievable. Melissa hugged me tightly, her joy evident in her embrace. I knew you could do it. Let's face this new world together. This moment was not only a major turning point in my professional life, but also strengthened the bond of our friendship. We were now ready to face new challenges, supporting each other along the way.
In the following weeks, Haley took on her new position at David's company. Her determination and effort, combined with her adaptability and business acumen, surprised everyone. Her ability to tackle complex corporate challenges earned her respect and admiration, solidifying her position as a leader. Meanwhile, Keith faced the consequences of his actions, spending his days in regret after losing his former position. His inability to manage the money Melissa previously oversaw led to a further decline in his finances. Eventually, Keith learned from his past mistakes and embarked on a small new project. Melissa continued to support Haley, and their friendship grew even stronger. Inspired by Haley's success, Melissa also began exploring new career opportunities, deciding to improve her skills and pursue further education to carve out a new path for herself. David saw his company thrive under Haley's leadership of new projects. He recognized the importance of giving potential talent opportunities, and this decision propelled the company to new levels of success. It also reinforced a culture of evaluating and including potential at every level. As a result, everyone embarked on a path of learning, which, though painful at times, ultimately led to positive outcomes. How did you find this story? We're able to continue posting inspirational stories almost every day, thanks to your likes. So, we would appreciate it if you could give this video a thumbs up. We want to keep encouraging you with stories of overcoming challenges. So, make sure you don't miss the video currently on your screen. See you there.